Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Getting
Hello.
everybody that's waiting in the lobby inside. Yep. So as I think you just got a notification, this webinar today will be recorded. And you can see the privacy policy up there, right? Staying on the line is giving consent to the recording of this webinar. So thank you again for joining us today. Ed Moriarty, the branch manager of the Standards and Assessments branch within the Community Compliance and Assistance Division within the Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water, will be giving a presentation regarding the updated Return to Compliance table published late 2024. We will take questions after the presentation. Please put your questions into the chat. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ed to talk about the RTC table.
All right, thank you very much, Grant. And again, my name is Ed Moriarty. And as Grant had said, I'm the branch manager in the Standards Assessment Branch in the Capacity and Compliance Assistance Division in the Office of Groundwater Drinking Water. And I'd like to thank you for you guys taking your time to join us. I'm going to be doing a rollout of the revised Return to Compliance table. I'll go ahead and I'll get our slideshow started. What I'm going to do is partway through do a demo of the table itself. We had blocked about an hour's time, though I don't know that it'll even take that long. Some of that will be based on you and some of your questions. As Grant had mentioned, please send your questions through the chat. We'll do our best to keep up and address the questions either during or when we finish the presentation. And anything we can't get addressed today, regardless of the reason, we'll make sure that we pick it up and get back to you guys after the fact. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. So as I mentioned, we're here today to do a rollout of the revised Return to Compliance table. I'm going to cover some background. I'm not going to go very deep into the background. I will talk about the process that we used this time to revise the table, and I'll talk about some next steps. So with regards to background, what is the RTC table, the Return to Compliance table? What this table does is it consolidates information in the Code of Federal Register in 141, Part 141. And what we're doing is we're capturing the violations that are identified for each of the national primary drinking water regulations. We include, for data purposes, data reporting purposes, what we call the reporting pair codes, the violation code, the rule code, the contaminant code, the information that's associated with the definition, what we call the definition for the return to compliance. In addition, we have the rule citation that for each of these violations are associated with. We also include the associated public notification tier requirement. So, for those who are not familiar, there are 3 types of tiering that are associated with the public notification or the PN rule. The tiering are tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 1 being for acute contaminants, those that require immediate notification. Tier 2 are for your chronic contaminants and treatment technique violations. And then tier 3 are for your monitoring and in some instances reporting violations. We also have a designation that you'll see on the table called SD, and that's state discretion. And what that means is if you're not familiar with the public notification rule, in 141-200 in that series of the rule of the CFR is Appendix A. And Appendix A outlines and specifies which violations are to be reported with an associated public notification rule. It also identifies the type of PN that's required. In addition, in the footnotes to that Appendix A, is a statement that the state may use their discretion to require public notification as they see fit. So for example, they could raise a public notification from a tier 3 to a tier 2 or to a tier 1 if they thought it was necessary. In addition, they could require public notification where it may not be specified in the regulations. The original version of the RTC table was released in March of 2012. Just some quick history. What we did was we actually had folks who walked through the CFR to identify all the violations that were in the Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR, at that time. And we created, it was a slightly smaller table. It didn't include some of the information like the public notification in that original version of the table. We then released a interim version in 2016 that included the revised total coliform rule. A couple things happened during this period of time. First, in addition to adding the revised total coliform rule, we also revised, well, not revised, but we created a new format for how violation codes could be entered. Previously, it was just numbers 1 through 99, I believe. What we did was we made it a little flatter. So under the RTCR, you could have a type 4 violation, but there was a type 4, I think it's A, B, C, or D. And each of those alphanumeric pairings were specific to a violation type. So what it allowed us to do is to be able to identify and specify more violations without extending that list that we had started originally. That brings us up to our current version of the table, and I will touch on how we arrived at this version of the table in a moment. But wanted to let you know, as Grant had said at the very beginning, this version of the table is released in December of 2024. And there's a link here, and we'll share the slide presentation with you later. The link will take you to a page that I'm going to show you in a moment. And from that page, you can download the table yourself. So just some quick background again on this table. It's designed so that you as the user can filter out specific elements within the table in order to identify what you're looking for. When I say elements, I'm referring to using the column header to sort on a particular item that you're looking for. For example, a particular violation type, a contaminant code. It could be a rule code. You could you could group it by the public notification tiering criteria. So at this point, I am going to go into our demonstration. First thing I said I would do is show you the page. If you hit that link that I showed you before, it's going to take you to this page. This page has a little bit of background with regards to the table and where we are now. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about who all was involved in the table development for this round. The button down here is where you would be able to download table. And once you do that, it'll open up in Excel and you'll be able to use the table as you like. So as far as the RTC table itself, and Grant, please let me know if folks can't see this. I might be able to do a little bit to expand on it. As I mentioned, this is an Excel table, and what we did was we collected the violations as they're identified in the Code of Federal Regulations under Part 141. So what we did was then we identified, and what I'm going to do is work across these headers to explain what they represent. The second column, the National Primary Drinking Water Regulations, we use that to identify a rule group, and there are approximately 20 regulations now. So we use that to be able to group the violations by the rule. And then, as I mentioned, there's the reportable violation code. Originally, I said that we were using a 2-digit number, so it went from 01 up to 99. We then flattened it out in order to be able to expand without having to go past 99, the 2 digits. The third column that's part of the table, and I will touch on the first column and what that represents in a moment, but the column that we're in now, this is the CIDWS contaminant code. We use this to identify the specific contaminant or contaminants, if it's a group, that are captured by the particular violation. So an O2 violation for nitrates could represent either a 1040 or a 1041 contaminant, nitrate or nitrite in this case. Then we have a violation description with the CFR citation. And this is where we take the reg language, and we also included the specific citation that's associated with that violation pairing that are part of columns C and D, or what I call columns 2 and 3. Next, we would identify the type of violation. These violations can be MCL, as you're seeing here. They can be monitoring and reporting violations, treatment technique violations. So we identify the violation type. That gives you another element that you can filter on if you're looking for a particular piece of information. As I'd mentioned, and this is one of the new, this is the newest column in the table, is the PN rule tier. So as I briefly described earlier, the violations are associated to a specific PN rule tiering requirement. The exception is for most of the regulations reporting. Most of the regulations for reporting do not require public notification, but there are some exceptions. And if I can come up with one real quick, I'll actually show that to you. But we put this in here in order, in particular for those who are working on compliance determinations, implementation of the data users, so that they have this easily accessible to make sure that they're associating the correct public notification requirement to the violation. Finally, this last column is what we call the return to compliance definition column. And this is the column that we use to identify or to define what would be required for a particular violation to be closed out. So if you go through any of these definitions, you're going to see a lot of them are similar, especially if we're talking about, for instance, an MCL, where the return to compliance would be the average getting back below the maximum contaminant level, or if it was a monitoring and reporting violation, collecting the appropriate sample that was required and then reporting it. Those would be examples of the definitions. Now, I'm going to take a moment here to describe the process that was involved, and I'm going to start with who was involved first. And for that, I'm going to come back to the table, but I wanted to touch on some of that other information first. So the latest RTC table release, we went through a very extensive review, and it actually ended up taking much longer than we had originally anticipated. And a lot of that had to do with, we wanted to make sure that our content was consistent. So when you're looking at the definitions, we did the best we could within a rule group, within a violation type, to make sure that the language was consistent. The original version of the table had various ways that the same definition had been written, so we made a point of trying to be as consistent, as I said, as possible. In addition to that, we had been collecting information over the years, and some of that information was errors or omissions that we'd found ourselves, but also there were a lot of pieces of information that were provided to us by outside entities, whether it was the EPA regions, the states. We had other entities who provided some information to us that help us to ground truth and QA this table better, to make sure that it was as complete as it can be. I am going to make a note here, two things. First, if anyone who's using the table happens to identify something that they think might be incorrect, we encourage you to let us know. We'll provide a point of contact for you at the end of this presentation. It'll probably be me. But we do want you to tell us if you find something that you think is wrong, or it could be something that might be misleading, in which case we may have to figure out how we wrote something out and see if there might be a better way to explain it. In addition to the process we went through internally and the information that we either identified internally or externally, we then tapped into our regulatory work groups and had them go through a review process to make sure that they understood and they were in agreement with what we had assembled. Our Office of Enforcement Compliance Assistance, they were involved in the review process, as well as the data managers, the CIDWS data user community. We gave them an opportunity to review it. They're one of the heaviest users of this table, and so we wanted to make sure that they were in agreement and that we were providing the information in a manner that would be consistent and trying to make it easier for them to use the table and make their work a little easier. With that, we then went through the process to update the table. So as I had mentioned before, in 2016, we had done an interim update to include the revised total coliform rule. Well, this table is now current and up to date through the lead and copper rule revisions. So it's as up to date with everything that's out and final as of today, with exceptions. And I'm going to touch on that next. As far as our next steps, we're going to update the table again to include the consumer confidence port revisions, the PFAS national primary drinking water regulations, and the lead and copper rule improvements. We're going to do these updates in the background, and then we'll have an announcement when these rules are updated. We'll use a phased approach as some of these regulations are going through some consideration again. So what we want to do is we'll get the rules updated that we know with confidence can be updated, and then we'll update the rest of them later when they are finalized. In each case, we'll have an announcement, and depending on the volume, we may do another rollout like this, or we may have some kind of an announcement on the webpage explain what was going on if it's a smaller rollout that we're doing. With that, I wanted to provide some kudos to those who are involved. I'd mentioned by group, but within EPA in particular, in addition to our rule managers, the folks in our data division, led by Justin Wright, Percy Ado, and others, spent a lot of time on this table going through the revisions that I described before in order to create consistency in the language. There was a lot of QA to make sure that we were identifying proper rule citations. And I'll say again, if somebody identifies something they think is wrong, please tell us. The other folks I wanted to mention, in addition to the contractor support, were the data users. They spent a lot of time on this table. We had, of course, I mentioned OECA, and wanted to make sure that they get recognized for the work they put into this table as well. I'm going to move back to the table now and just show you some of the features. There aren't a whole lot of bells and whistles on this table, but what I wanted to show you is, as I mentioned at the beginning, that with this table, you can sort on a particular topic or item element that you might be interested in. And I'm going to show you, for example, so if I was interested in looking at a particular regulation, and in this case, I'll look at groundwater rule, I can just filter on groundwater rule. And so slowly scrolling through the table, I've now just sorted on those rows that are associated with the groundwater rule. If I wanted to identify within the groundwater rule violations that are associated with a type 45, I can do that. And in this case, I come up with one row, and it has to do with sanitary surveys and significant deficiencies. So in this case, if it's a water system that did not meet the corrective action schedule, for example, then that would be the type, this would be a violation that would be issued. So it'd be a type 45. In this case, the CIDWS contaminant code is actually what we call a rule code, a 0700. So that identifies the groundwater rule. For this particular type of violation, it would be a treatment technique violation. It would require tier 2 PN. And the definition would be once the system has completed the corrective action or the system is in compliance with an approved schedule, then that system's violation could be closed out or it could be returned to compliance. in order to get back to the original table, I just have to clear out all the filters. I'll do a couple more filters, but I wanted to touch on this item column over here. We use this column to identify unique rows. So rather than somebody trying to say, well, I think you have a typo, it's groundwater rule, it's type 45-0700, because there could be a number of them or not, depending on the rule. You can just refer to this item number. So I think you guys have an error, EPA, and it looks like it's item number 168. And then you can tell us what you think it is. And this makes it easier for everyone when they're discussing items within the table to be able to identify which one and track which one we're talking about. I do want to touch again quickly. I'd mentioned that there are 3 types of public notice: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 for acute, chronic, and monitoring and reporting violations. And there's also a category called other, that's part of the tier 3 reporting. But I'd mentioned this state discretion, and I touched on it briefly. I just wanted to go back over that again, and I'll go ahead and I'll filter on this. So if I was to scroll through, and there's, in this case for groundwater rule, because I didn't clear it out. So there are a number of instances where we have a violation, and a lot of these, I'd say most of them are associated with reporting, where under the public notification rule, it's a violation, but there's no requirement to do the public notification. So what we did here, because as I mentioned, one of the footnotes to Appendix A states that there's state discretion. So where we have a violation and we don't have an associated public notification requirement, we identified that as state discretion. We did that because otherwise the table was going to have gaps where it would have looked like there was a violation but nothing associated to it. So we wanted to be able to identify, because it is in the regulations that the state has discretion to assign these public notifications if they want to. Some of those violation types I said are R. Some of them are monitoring and reporting, and that applies for most of these violation types. Actually, I'll look to see if there is an exception. I don't think so. These are all of them, but actually, I'll go ahead and take a look. I don't think there are any. Now I'm a little curious. Oh, okay, yeah, we do have. So here's an example, treatment technique that does allow for state discretion, and it has to do with water system that not being operated by a qualified operator. So that's an example of a treatment technique where it's state discretion for the public notification. And this is just an example again of how you could use the table if you're looking for particular information that's associated with the violations, the return to compliance, and public notification. I'll go ahead and clear these out. Should be everything. All right. So we're at the end of what I was going to do as far as the presentation goes to show you what the table is. I saw some hands popping up. So Grant, at this time, we could start, I guess, addressing some questions. Do you have any that are set up, ready to go?
Sure. So a number of folks asking for a link to the RTC table itself. Ryan Graydon has very helpfully provided a link. And to anybody not reading the chat, we will send out the link to the table itself in an email to all of the registrants after we're done here. There was a question from Damon Guterman asking why the item number entries are not necessarily sequential. And that is because when we went through the process of developing this table, we, try to remove all of the violations that are no longer applicable. Right. So DBPR, trihalomethane, and haloacetic acid violations, for instance, have been fully superseded by DBPR2 violations. Right. So we've removed the, no longer applicable violations from the table, and that's why there are some item numbers that are missing. Don is asking if the table is up to date for LCRR or LCRI.
So yeah, as I'd mentioned earlier, the table is up through LCRR. We will do our next update that'll include the consumer confidence report revisions. It'll include PFAS and LCRI. Probably PFAS will be the last rule. We'll probably start with the CCR and the LCRI, and then PFAS. The delay on the PFAS would be, if you're not aware, the administrator issued back in May a notice that the PFAS rule is going under review, considering a rescission as well as a update. So we wouldn't want to work on this table with regards to PFAS until we have a final rule. So we'll probably focus on, as I said, CCR3 and the lead and copper rule improvements before we move on to PFAS.
Thank you. Okay, I have a question from Matthew asking if there is a way to include a column for identifying what TMF capacity is impacted as well.
Yeah. We could, yes. I mean, we could always add columns. We would have to figure out how we would incorporate that information. So that's something I can talk to our capacity development branch about and see if there's a way that we could possibly add that kind of information.
Great, thank you. Question asking if the slides will be available for download and or possibly appended to the link to the table itself.
The slides?
Yes.
Okay, we will we'll send the slides back out.
Yep. Okay. So slides will be sent out to all of the registrants.
Yep.
Question asking if there is a key to the type of violation codes, and then as noted in the chat, this table effectively serves as a key to the violation codes, which again are corresponding to the violations codes found in CITWAS-Fed. Question from Beth. For instances of state discretion in column G, where EPA has direct implementation authority, do the regions use discretion for PN?
Let me read your question, Beth. As the primacy agency, yes, you would have discretion.
And can you hear me, Ed?
Yes, I can.
Great. So does that mean each region would use its own independent discretion, or are we applying our primacy agency discretion as EPA universally? And how do we ensure that?
We're going to have to talk through that. We can do that offline because that's a good point. We got to make sure we have consistency.
Correct. Thank you.
I have a question. Are there still going to be type 01 violations that nitrates are currently?
It's a good question. It's a good question, Elizabeth, and good recall. No. What we did was we eliminated that 01 violation. The intent had been twofold. Way back in the day, the nitrate rule, nitrite rule has a piece in there that says if they fail, if they exceed the MCL, they are supposed to do a confirmation sample. And if they can't get that done within 2 weeks, they're supposed to issue notice and then collect the confirmation sample, do the average, and then make a compliance determination. There had been a practice where systems didn't collect that sample. So in one case, the 01 violation was used to make a compliance determination for the single sample. There were also practices where that 01 was being used for the nitrite. So there was some inconsistency in how the violation code was being used. And so what we did was, after consulting with OGC, we came back and and as the rule language reads, the compliance is based on a running annual average. That's what that 02 represents. And so we went ahead and we revised this table such that the violation determination would be based on that 02 violation rather than the single sample.
Great. Okay, I have a question from a Sidwis State user. Are the RTC actions mandated? I understand the table provides the information for when a system is eligible. I am looking to see if we are required to apply the RTC enforcement actions.
So if you're referring to the definitions, that piece of the table is guidance. This is how we recommend, and this is what we worked with our Office of General Counsel, or OGC. We worked with them on the review of these definitions. We tried to be as straightforward and use common sense as we could. That doesn't mean a privacy agency couldn't be more stringent if they wanted to be.
Question, will this table replace the EPA violation master table, or will that also be updated?
Another good question. Somebody's got a good memory. Any data elements that are generated should be all based on this table going forward. We actually we tried to start that practice a while ago, and we're going to try and maintain that. So everything should be consistent.
That's a question. Any chance you are considering a similar list of TMF issues that should be identified as recommendations, deficiencies, and/or significant deficiencies?
Probably not in this table, but we are working on a tool that would discuss TMF and capacity that we're hoping to get released a little bit later, early fall.
And then a question asks for a clarification regarding nitrate and RAAs.
Greg, could you repeat that one, please?
The question, I think you had said something about nitrate being evaluated as an RAA, and
Right.
a commenter asked for clarification.
I see it now. I see it now. So in the case of nitrate, like a number of other contaminants, if you're on reduced monitoring, I'll start with that example. Some of the contaminants can be on reduced monitoring, in which case they may be only collecting a sample once a year, once every 3 years, 6, 9. That sample is the sample that's used for the compliance determination. Now, is that sample an average? No, it's the single sample, but compliance is based on a running annual average. So we're applying the same logic for the nitrates. I recognize that for the nitrate, that sample is collected for the monitoring period, but we wanted to establish consistency in how the data was being reported. And when we had the 01 code, we had variations on how compliance was being determined for nitrates. And not only was it whether or not they used the 01 or the 02, it was how it was applied, whether, for example, an exceedance of the MCL, and did they collect a confirmation sample or not. So that's part of why we went to just the 02 code after we conferred with our Office of General Counsel.
Right. Ed, I think you're discussing the compliance period of a year, not that it's evaluated as an annual average.
Correct.
Right, yeah, so as a clarification. And then there is a question if they can continue to use O1s for nitrate if they require PN of violation off of one sample.
I don't know that the O1 code's going to even work anymore, but if there was a single sample that exceeded the MCL, they should be collecting the confirmation sample. They should be doing that to make sure they can verify whether or not they actually have a problem.
So, hi, this is Janelle from Texas. Quick question on the nitrates. So we have some chronic exceeders that we know are going to exceed. They're under EPA orders. Some of them are under Texas orders to work on this. And we do not require confirmation samples on those because we know historically that they are exceeders. So for the sample or for the resampling, or sorry, the confirmation sampling and then averaging, there's no reason because we already know, and we are more stringent as a state due to that. So we cannot utilize the O2 codes because we are more stringent.
Hi, this is Anne from Ohio EPA, and we kind of do the same thing. We do have some people that have, over 8 that are on quarterly monitoring. And when those people do exceed the MCL, or those systems rather, we don't make them collect a resample. We have faith in the result that it is over the 10 milligrams per liter. And so we do issue a few type O1s because we don't require the resample, because we do have, faith in the accuracy of the result, because they do have results over, at least half the MCL or 80% of the MCL on a regular basis. So we have issued quite a few, maybe not quite a few, but a handful of type O1s over the past couple of years. And it would be helpful to keep using that code as an acute contaminant, since it is not based on an RAA. It's an acute contaminant, and that single sample will trigger an MCL.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I think what we need to do is we can talk about this one offline and bring the regions in, and we'll have to talk to the data folks to make sure this is going to still be okay. But I see your point as to why you want to continue to use it.
There should still be, what is it? State discretion, right? And that the state itself should have the ability to use an O1 code corresponding to a state violation, and not necessarily the O1 federal code. So that functionality should still be possible. But again, right, we can send a clarification out.
Right. And we will need to talk to the data folks as well. But I do hear what you're saying, Anne and Janelle.
Okay. All right. A lot of questions here. It is possible that the link that was sent out may not work to external partners, such as most of the participants. So we'll work on sending out a link that is accessible to everybody shortly after this meeting. And then I think, are there any other? Oh, I have a question from Vermont. If a TNC gets a notice or NOAV for not taking 3 additional routine samples in the month following a TC positive sample, can this be RTC'd once they collect their next routine sample, or must they take 3 in a single month RTC?
I'm sorry, that was long. Could you repeat that again?
Yes, it actually might be easier, Steve, if you're on the call. Do you want to ask the question so I properly?
Sure. So if a transient non-community waterworks that's on quarterly monitoring has a routine total call-up form positive sample, they have to take 3 additional routines in the month after the routine positive. In the RTC table, in order to return to compliance on that, do they have to take 3 and they supposed to get a violation? Do they have to take 3 in a single month to return to compliance? Single month sample return to compliance, and also what happens if it gets that action, that NOAV, triggers them into monthly monitoring increased. The table's kind of vague, I feel like.
Okay, well, thanks for that feedback. I would have to verify with the rule manager, but my recollection is if they failed to collect any of the repeats, that those would have to be collected. So I think that addresses the first part of your question.
They're not repeats though, they're routine.
So we're talking about the month after when they have to collect the additional routine samples.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, then again, failure to collect those the month after samples would still require that they're all collected. The analogy would be to groundwater rule. And if a water system has multiple wells and they trigger and all those wells were active at the time that the samples had been collected, and they did not have a plan in place for consolidating to collect a sample representative of the well or well field, for example, then they're supposed to collect triggered samples at each of those wells. And if they don't do it for, say they had 10 wells going, and if they didn't collect it at 9 of the wells, then that's a violation, and they're supposed to go back and collect from each of the wells. And what I can also do, Steve, is I got the question, and like I said, I'll check with the rule manager to make sure that we can fully complete a response for you.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
thank you.
for specific inquiries regarding content within the table, if you could please email them to Ed, and then we will make sure that they are addressed either within the table or clarifications are issued as necessary. And at this time, I think we will also be issuing a statement or some kind of clarification regarding the 01 violation type codes. So please look forward to that in your inbox, and we'll make sure that information is distributed probably via ASWA to all of the various primacy agencies out there. Are there any other questions regarding the table? The table at large, not necessarily the specific entries.
If this is meant to replace the master table, then where would we look for compliance period begin dates and end dates? Because I don't believe they're covered.
Go ahead.
Here. I don't believe they're covered.
No, we do not cover that here. There are a lot of products that are developed by our drinking water information data folks. And as I mentioned, they're all tied together. They should all be consistent as far as the information, but like that master violation table, it also has additional information like beginning and compliance dates. And that information will always reside there. And what we can do as a part of responding to some of these questions here is figure out if they've got a public facing page where you guys can get to that information.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. I think I know what guidance you are talking about. Yeah.
Okay. As Moriarty's email is in the chat, I will send a follow-up email once the recording is available with contact information for questions about the table itself, and as well as any items needing clarification. I do anticipate at this time that we will have some clarification regarding type 01 violations to be sent out as well.
And just expanding on that, Chuck, I see your question. We'll figure out exactly what is or may happen, and we'll make sure that we clarify that. So to your question, do we need to change the O1s to O2s? Don't change anything. We need to find out exactly what's going to happen in particular as we move to safeties. But I would anticipate that they would never tell you to change the original violation designation. So I don't think you'd ever change those O1s, but we'll get clarification on that and get back to you guys.
Okay. If there are no other questions at this time, we can adjourn this meeting. A recording as well as these slides will be sent to the recipients and posted on the EPA Drinking Water Training website. And then we'll work on getting some clarifications regarding Type 01 violations and any other questions regarding specific entries within this table, can be sent to Ed Moriarty. And we will make sure that the link to the table itself is also fully accessible to everybody, since I'm seeing that some people are having issues with it. If there are no other questions, then we can adjourn this call and thank everybody for their time. Thank you all very
Something
much.
popped up.
Thank
All right,
you.
well, thank you, guys. We appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yep, and I'm going to end the event and recording now.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, let's see.